Hi, folks. It's lovely to be here in Arizona again, at least virtually. My name is Charlie, and I am codependent in recovery from a deeply rooted compulsive behaviour, which all but destroyed my life. And I had no idea what it was, no idea at all. We were speaking before the meeting, and shared a little of my experience was I came to recovery in a different fellowship to do with my other issues in life. And in 2 months' time, that will be 49 years ago. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I knew certainly that I had a massive drink problem and there was drugs involved in that. I was a teenager in the 60s, so that was sort of par for the course. I want to share a little bit about codependency as I did not understand it, and hopefully mention time quite a few times, because I think time has been such an important factor in my recovery and in my understanding of codependency. I was born and raised in the East End of Glasgow, which is the largest town in Scotland. It's on the west coast. I now live in Edinburgh, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, with the Edinburgh Festival and the famous castle and all the other things that go on there. I've been here about 13 years. And when I look back on it, part of the reason that I ended up on the East Coast in Edinburgh was untreated and unidentified codependency. I know for a fact that family dynamics play such a huge part in this, and I love the preamble and welcome in CODA, where it speaks very honestly and I think integrously around the fact that for many of us, and I'm certainly one of those who developed what I now understand as codependency, excuse me, within a dysfunctional family system. I had no idea about that. I was, the family tell me, a very sensitive child, a very loving child, a very optimistic child. And as the unfolding of my journey would have it, my father was a practicing alcoholic. He was a very schizoid man. He had the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. You never knew what you were going to get. Sometimes it was holding hands and singing songs and sharing bags of sweet, I think you guys call it candy. Other times there would be horrendous violence and the home would be smashed to pieces. And I saw that man as a threat to everything that I loved, my mother and my two sisters. And I'm talking a child of 7, maybe 8 years of age at that point. I didn't know what was wrong with my father, and I had no idea that eventually I would have the same problem. But I know that my personality started to change, and when we went to school, I was just a kid, sort of first grade stuff, I couldn't take in what was being said. I was traumatized. I understand that now. I have language for this experience. And I just switched off. And from that time, first grade, I just wanted to leave. So I absorbed nothing. I just went into a bubble. I see it now as self-protection. I see it and understand it now as an inevitable consequence of a child with no understanding and no reference points, being in a dysfunctional family, whatever the cause of that might be. And I got lost within myself. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Time, so important. I get 20/20 vision with hindsight, and I'm able to look back now. Thankfully, CODA has played a huge part in this, with compassion, with love and understanding for that child. But also have it, and this is one of the biggest miracles of my life, for my father. The ambition was to grow up, eat as much as I could, become very, very strong, and kill my father. That is not a healthy place for a child to be. I ran away as much as I could. I just couldn't be in the family home with the damage that was being done. So I would just run away. We're maybe talking 9, 10 years of age. And the police would be out looking for me. I'd get taken back home. And why did you run away? And I couldn't tell anyone. Another codependent trait. I couldn't be disloyal to my father. The house of secrets and lies. I couldn't express myself. By the time I'm 12, I've been taken to see a child psychologist because I swallowed all of my mother's medication. I don't know what that medication was. It wasn't an attempt to to take my own life. I don't think, I can't read the mind of that child, but for whatever reason, I swallowed all of her medication, was found in the street, taken to hospital, got my stomach pumped. And the focus went on me. Why is Charlie like this? And my mother's sitting there with me, with the psychologist, saying, we don't understand why he's like this. No one mentioned alcoholism in the home. So the spotlight went on me. I was the problem. And I loathed that. I rebelled against that. I was only a child, but I had enough discernment to know that I was living in a crazy place where nothing made sense. Alice in Wonderland, really, I went down the rabbit hole into this very strange experience. And my life really crumbled from there. The emotional damage was already done. I can see that clearly now. I couldn't see that then. My life took a terrible turn. And I left home at 15. I had already spent some time in a children's remand home, they called them. I had been found trying to burn down some old cars in a scrapyard, a junkyard. And again, I had no idea why. And again, I was assessed, and it was, what's wrong with Charlie? And the resentment and the frustrations grew around that. But I found myself just wanting to leave. And it's the only time I'll mention it, that's when I found alcohol. And a few years later, I found other substances. And it was the only thing that gave me a sense of ease and comfort, a sense of escape. But I'm stuck with these old tapes that it talks about in our 12-step introductions in the Green Workbook. The old tapes are playing in my head. I'm in conflict because that child didn't disappear. He just got warped and broken. I was in love with the idea of love. I wanted loving families. I wanted loving relationships. I used to tell my mother, my father had beaten her up, when I grow up, I'm going to get married and I'll have a big house and you can come and live with us. That's when I started to recognise, looking back on it, time again, hindsight, that was the beginning of the rescuer. The need to fix, the need to take away other people's pain. Of course, that's impossible, but I didn't know that. But as my journey went on, it involved me being involved in prisons. I did what so many kids do. I found another dysfunctional family in the streets, and the behaviour became outrageous, and I was to end up in prison several times. Got married to a girl, knew her 6 weeks, and we got married. She was from a different religion, and in the west of Scotland that seems to be a very important factor. Her parents hated it. My parents, I think by that time, had just given up on me. We don't know what's going to happen to him. But I'm in love with the idea of being in love. What I don't know, and it takes years in recovery to really grasp, is I am not emotionally available. Now, when you're a romantic who wants to be in love, but don't know how to express yourself, that's a hellish place to be. And I would get frustrated and I would get angry. I've never lifted my hands to a woman. I think that was ingrained in me with my mother and my 2 sisters. But I got angry. I get so angry. And the behaviours I saw in my father were beginning to manifest in me. And I'm loathing myself for that. But I don't understand why I'm doing it, because I had promised myself I would never be like him. And I had promised myself that everything was going to be wonderful. I'm living in this fantasy land, but there's no substance and no reality. There's no way forward for me. I didn't know that the damage had been done in that childhood experience. The old tapes keep playing. Anyway, I got to a point where the marriage broke up and my wife took her child, left, and she came back a week or 2 later. I'd already been on a horrendous bender, trying to blot it out, loathing myself, seriously thinking about taking my life. And she came back to get the kids' clothing. And she said, I'm not coming back. She says, there's something far wrong with you. Oh, I'd heard that so many times. That wasn't news. I think you're an alcoholic and you need help. Been called many things, but I've never been called that. And I went and sought help. The intention was not to sort out my life. It was to manipulate, to control, to get back what I thought I needed. And of course, other people are involved in it. There's also places and things involved in it. When I see now how the tentacles of codependency really, go in some strange places, but it was all about trying to find that ease and comfort thing, whatever it was. I was very fortunate. I met a man who basically fathered me as much as sponsored me and introduced me to the 12-step recovery program. And he was the first man I ever heard actually verbalise feelings and thinking. I thought it was just about deal with the substance, I'll be okay. Of course, there's no evidence for that. But he spoke to me about fear and about insecurity. He spoke about resentments, rage, the inability to control my emotional nature. Of course, he's using the I statement, but I know he's talking to me and I'm identifying. Couldn't handle relationships, self-loathing. So I began to get an understanding that there was something wrong, but the terminology of CODA was not there. Got married another twice over the years and still couldn't find the inner peace that I desperately needed. I had grown a lot, I'd matured a lot, I could barely read and write when I came to my initial first fellowship experience. Got an education for 7 years, and I realised that I wasn't dumb. I was just stuck inside and afraid. I was afraid to learn. I was afraid to get anything wrong. So I just closed myself up. And over that period, I think what was happening was I was embracing the 12 steps to the best of my ability at that time for what I thought the 12 steps were appropriate for. I had no idea about emotional sobriety, emotional recovery, the need for inner healing, the healing of my mind, my emotions, my spirit. So there's the inevitable crash and breakdown. I now look at the breakdowns as an opportunity to break through. And I'm just cursing life and thinking, why do these other guys have the luck that they have? Why do they have the opportunities that they have? And I did get opportunities, but I tended to ruin them. I would self-destruct one way or another. I would crash. And it fed the self-pity and the self-loathing. So I was not a happy person. Although I was in a fellowship with a 12-step recovery program and I was working it, but there was this whole shadow side that I see now. And again, time comes into it. It just was not my time, and there weren't the people around me who can speak the way that I do, the CODA people do. They weren't talking about the damage. They weren't talking about the wreckage of the past that was still very much involved in my life and my crazy journey. But again, there seems to be synchronicities work. That's what I began to see, that things happened for a reason. There seemed to be unfoldings that I would spot from time to time that I reckon was part of this idea of a power greater than myself. And I had made some kind of genuine attempt at step 3. I'm willing to turn my will in my life over. I'm not quite sure what my will in life is, but if you want it, you're welcome to. You can make a bigger mess of it than I have. I think that was the kind of attitude at that point. I'm looking for a fire escape. I'm looking for a way out. But time and experiences brought me to a point where I was beginning to suffer from a very, very deep depression and anxiety. Now, these are medical conditions, and I would refer them back to the child at 12 years of age sitting in front of the consultant psychologist. And I don't know what's wrong with Charlie, and I didn't get any answers there. No, as I say, no one said, is there alcoholism in the head? And has this boy's head been fried? The confusion around him? Has he internalised the woundedness and frustrations that go along with a contradiction in nature and nurture? Loving, gentle child, war zone. And I would ask myself these questions, and I prayed and meditated, and I worked my step 6 and 7. Please remove this from me. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be angry, frustrated. I don't want to feel this deep, deep loneliness. I don't want to do, when I was using other materials to sort myself out, to become an actor, producing different personalities in different situations in order to make other people happy so that they would like me at least, love me perhaps. But I couldn't, when it was given to me, I couldn't recognise it for what it was. I saw that was my second wife. We had 2 children. I had a horrendous relapse and I lost my wife and 2 children. And it was a nightmare. It was very brief, but very costly. And again, I'm forced back into the corner. Maybe sounds strange at this part of the story, but I now see that as the grace and the love of a God of my understanding had to put me in that position. And it's been not blaming God. I created my own misery with my own ill-informed decisions and driven by out-of-control emotions I didn't understand. I moved up to the East Coast, as I was sharing earlier, about 13 years ago. And I'd worked in a professional job. I managed a service office in Scotland of the fellowship that I loved. And I was taken out of that office on a stretcher, we would call it. I think it's a gurney is the word you guys use, with clinicians. And I had my first heart attack. I couldn't cope with it. I was filled with paranoia. Yeah, I could do the job, that's for sure. But the internal stuff was crippling me, filled with paranoia. The dark thoughts of, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, the low self-esteem and the self-loathing, kicking back in again. Anyway, I ended up a couple of years later getting a triple heart bypass surgery. And I'm still alive, thank goodness. But as a result of circumstances, I ended up at the East Coast here. And I went along to my meetings, and I couldn't find really anyone to relate to. There wasn't, again, a lot of talk around the stuff that I needed to address. We started some meetings, and I've always been involved in service, and that's always been a part of my journey. But I even used that, looking back on it, as a way to distract myself. But there came a point, and I don't know really how, it's one of these things I think that happens in recovery. Again, circumstances just conspire in a way to put me in a place where I began to wonder, what is really wrong, and how do I heal? I'd also been ordained as a Christian minister. I studied theology, and I was interested in history of religions and the world's spirituality. So it wasn't that I was sitting there as an atheist or agnostic. I had actively engaged in the process, which actually frustrated me even more. It seemed the more I searched and the more I looked, the harder it was to find. What I eventually found was actually within me anyway. What a revelation that was. A friend of mine phoned me up one day and said, there's a lot of kids coming out of the treatment centre and they're hearing about codependency. Would you like to help me to open a meeting of Codependents Anonymous? And I said, I don't know anything about codependency. How is that for ignorance? I know nothing about that. What's that about? He says, 12-step programs. Yes, really, yeah. Same as our 12 steps, yeah, same ones. Apart from the first step, of course, which highlights the presenting problem. I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I went along, there was only 3 of us, and one of the guys left at half time. I think it was too much for him. But it was the readings that got me. It really hooked me. I thought, wow, deeply dysfunctional family system. Trauma. These words are coming into my head. And I read, I don't remember which one, it was one of the patterns. And that was hook, line and sinker. That's me. And it could have been anyone in the control, the compliance, the avoidance, the denial, certainly the low self-esteem. So we started to get involved. We kind of sponsored each other. There was only one Coda meeting in Scotland, and that was in the East Coast. And I think that was struggling at that time. We started to find other people without realising. This is why I do believe, so completely in the traditions of Coda. Loving God, loving higher power. I thought it's time, maybe for people like Charlie, to get some answers to what's been troubling them, what's been confusing them. And these kids started to come along, and they were wacky, absolutely wacky. And I loved them. I thought, wow, they're just like me. They're crazy. They're 50 years younger than me, but they're just like me. And it was mostly substances other than alcohol, of course, that was involved, just because of their generation. And I thought, wow. And the honesty that they had, they wanted to know. And I felt the deficiency, because I had examined the inner condition, but I was terrified to talk to people about it, because when I tried, they would say, oh, don't talk about that stuff. And that's no disrespect to them or anything else. It's just where they were in their journey. And it's been absolutely amazing since then. I went through the program with my friend, and I went online and I searched, and I kind of overcooked it a bit, where I got overwhelmed with information. And the teaching from my past came back. I love it. Keep it simple, Charlie. It's just for today. Live and let live. This is what it actually means, Charlie, is mind your own business, look at your own stuff. Stop justifying your stuff on other people. Who am I to criticise? Well, I'd already done numerous 4 steps, but I'll tell you, doing it in Coda was a revelation. Because it wasn't just about the circumstances that I'd hurt other people through. It was about my emotional inabilities. It was about the stuff I had never looked at and addressed in any depth whatsoever. So my journey in Coda has just been a wonderful gift, discovering the layers of what codependency is. But because I had that other experience, that has been such a gift. Because I can look at it, there's a term that's used, we couldn't see the beauty of the forest for the ugliness of some of the trees. And that made sense to me. Once I saw the ugliness of some of the trees and the inner manifestations of what was happening to me in my mind and my emotions, there was a sense of liberation. I know the ugly trees are in the forest, but I don't go looking for them anymore. I have hope, and I have direction, and I have friends. And in Edinburgh we now have, I think it's 4 meetings, and there's one in Dundee, which is further up the east coast. And there are more people coming to Codependence Anonymous. Some of them from other fellowships. And of course, everyone's welcome here. They've got a desire for healthy and loving relationships. It's the only requirement for membership. And I've seen people like myself finding that they had the tools, but they didn't really understand the nature of the problem. And learning how to use those tools in a way that allows them a new freedom and a new happiness and an insight into not just their past, but to be able to look at how do we deal with this stuff in the day. And for me, you hear it all the time, it's so obvious, step 10, 11 and 12. They're so important for me. I need regular daily inventory. I have to catch the beastie first thing in the morning. When it wakens up and says, oh, you're not too well today, Charlie. I do have physical ailments I've got to live with. I'm tired. Oh, you had that phone call last night where that guy just moaned and groaned. Do you want more of that? Oh, no. Go back to bed, Charlie. I've got to catch it in the morning. And my step 11 is the key to that, my morning surrender. My need, and it is a need, it's an inner need now. I feel it physically as well as emotionally. My need to connect with my program, with the God of my understanding, and surrender my will in my life, because I know what it is now. My will in my life is my thinking and the actions that come from that thinking. And if I embrace God's will for me, which is to be happy, joyous and free, to know that new freedom, that new happiness, then I can get on with developing, and that all hinges around step 12. I've got to give this gift away in order to keep it. I've discovered there's so many paradoxes in recovery. They're just counterintuitive in so many ways. But I think the spiritual life is like that. It has to be contrary to my ego and my need to figure things out and get strategies and put them in place and then shepherd them like a sheepdog and make sure nothing moves. I can see the deep insecurity. I can see where control comes from. I can see where I have complied, sometimes in order to control. I can certainly see the avoidance, and I can see the denial. But what I see most lessening in my life is the low self-esteem. Because I know my place. I've found my place. It's within fellowship life. It's within the 12-step recovery program. It's abandoning myself to that and letting go of any resistance that comes up. And it does, of course it does. I'm a human being human. I love that in the Coda literature. It doesn't make excuses for humanity or my humanity. It allows me to be human with all the different facets that are around that. But if I'm at peace with myself, and I'm at peace with my fellows, I'm at peace with the world, I'm at peace with my God today. But that's ongoing maintenance, time, and it takes time. I got as frustrated as I think so many people do when we come in to Coda and other fellowships, and they desperately want that change. There's an immediacy about it. I want it and I want it now. Why is it not working for me? Why is it working for other people? It's not working for me. And all those different phases. Coda literature says there is a plan, talks about it in the steps. There is a plan. And it's not your plan, Charlie, it's God's plan. And you need to be able to just walk at the pace of the plan without trying to rearrange the furniture and rearrange everybody else's life. You can't run the show because you don't know what the show is and it's not your show in the first place. And that gave me a release, remarkable release. So I'm now really excited, and I'll close on this. Time has allowed me to get to the place now, having gone through all these ups, downs, roundabouts, back, forward, it's allowed me to realise, just for me, and I don't project it onto anyone else, that I don't need to control, and I certainly don't need to comply. I don't need to avoid. I don't have to, and I think this is one of the most precious things, I don't have to deny my reality. I can celebrate it. And the low self-esteem really is based on the fact that I am a part of you guys. I am one of you. I haven't met any of you before, certainly physically. But I know that I am a part of you. And with my perception, it doesn't matter whether you feel it or not, you're a part of me. I see a sense of oneness and everything, connectedness. I've recently got into, excuse me, by the way, I can't count, I still can't count, hopeless. Can't even use a calculator, useless. I've got a fascination for quantum mechanics and physics and quarks and all sorts of weird things. I hear them talking about it, I don't understand what they're meaning, but I get the concept of connectedness. And for a man and a child who felt so separated, that's a gift. That is a real gift. So it's lovely to come to Arizona and meet people who have met Rona on screen before, and I think one or two other members of the group. But to come to Arizona and feel that I'm not a stranger, and to not think that you're strange, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. The age of miracles is not past. It really just boils down to, what do you understand a miracle to be? And I keep it really simple. It's changed lives. There's people being awakened to new realities. It's lovely to be with you. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Thank you.